In this video, I'm going to go through an example of using composition or aggregation with our classes in C++. So I'm going to create a boat class eventually, and the boat class will have a name, which is a string, and it will also have a has-a relationship with a motor class, which will define as having a brand, which is a string, and horsepower, which is an int. Okay. So since we want to include the motor in the boat, we're going to do the motor first. Okay. So let's start here. So I've got my IOStream and string, and then my using namespace standard here. Okay. So we have our class motor. Okay. We'll start with the private stuff, then we'll add the public on top as we've been doing. Okay. So we want a string called brand, we want an int called horsepower. Okay. And then I'm going to add public things. Okay. So public starts with a constructor, okay, which will set things up for us. So it's called motor. Okay. It's going to take a string B, and it's going to take an int HP. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and use the one line constructor, which I don't always love, but I think we've done this enough that we should be okay in this case. Okay. So we're going to set brand equal to B, and we're going to set the horsepower. I'm going to send it the HP. Okay. Then when we do that, we just put open and close brackets. So we're also going to have a function to display the details of the motor. Okay. We have void function display motor. Okay, it's a constant function, shouldn't change anything. Okay, so in this case, we're not going to deal with accessors and mutators because it's we're going to use, so again, this, when you have a display function, it functions as the accessor. So it's a compound accessor. So the display motor will allow us to see both the brand and the horsepower. And that's the kind of control we want. And we don't want to allow any changes to be made to either of those once they're set. Okay, so we'll keep it like that. So this one's just going to do a C out. We're going to have the motor brand as the text, colon, brand. And down here, we're going to have horsepower. HP, no, horsepower, and then the horsepower variable, member data, okay, and then the HP to show that it's that many horsepower in our display, and then we'll end our line. Okay, and then there's the private. It's the only functions we're going to need. Then we're going to end that. So we should be able to test this one out. If we wanted, we could instantiate in int main an actual motor, and that would be fine. We're not going to do that. We're just going to go ahead and put them together. So next thing we want is a boat class. We're going to say class boat. Again, we'll start at the private and then move it down. The private here is going to be a string for name. And then a motor. So the motor is the class above. We're going to call motor. Okay, so the boat has And I put those in caps. So that's what we're talking about has a relationship motor. Okay. And this again is our composition. So that's all we have for the member data there. Okay. So we then should be able to go back and add public stuff here. So the public, we're going to have our constructor. And it's going to initialize a boat with a motor. Okay. So boat is going to be our constructor. So we're going to say string N for the name. We're going to say string B for the brand. We're going to say int HP for the horsepower. The name is going to go to N. And then the motor, so we're now calling the constructor of the motor, is going to take the B for the brand and the HP. Okay, so we have to call, this is setting the name part that is the name down here for the private, this name here. This motor is calling the motor object that we're creating, and it's going to take a brand and a horsepower number. Okay, that should give us that. Then we're also going to do another function here called display. But this time we're going to display the whole thing. So it's going to be a display boat function. Again, we're not going to allow mutators, and this will take the place of any accessors we would have. And that's a constant function because that's any print only function. It's not going to change. Okay, accessors never, right? Accessors are always constant. Okay. We're going to see out here the boat name, colon, space, name. That's all we're doing. So that's going to get the boat and its name. That's all that's addition. That's the only thing we're adding to the motor class. So now we can use the display from the motor function or the motor member data so that we can then say motor dot display motor. And that will call the function we just defined up there that will print the rest of that. Okay. Should all we need there. Close that function. So again, to recap these before we test them, here we have our motor class, okay, which contains, you see down here, a string for brand, int for horsepower. The constructor is just going to take that B and the HP and set brand to B and horsepower to P, okay? And then we're just going to, instead of an accessor or a mutator, we're having just an accessor that just prints those two things out. And then we have the boat class that has two member data, name, which is a string, and a motor. So in our constructor, we have to send N, which is the name that goes to the name of the boat class, and then the brand and the HP we're going to send to the motor class. So here we're setting the name to N, and the motor instance, we're sending it the B and the HP to initialize those. Okay. Then we have a display boat function that's going to use the display function from the motor down here, but first it's going to go ahead and print the name on the screen. So as far as testing this out, let's see if I've got it all correct. We need to add, well, we can start there and just see if it compiles. Okay, and it does, except when you see this, it says here that there's undefined reference to main. It just means we can't run this because it doesn't have a main, which we knew. So we're going to go ahead and add a main to it to test this out. Put that in before I forget. Okay, so we're going to create a new boat. and we're going to call it boat one. And we're going to send it name of the boat. Let's call it Speedster. We're going to send it the brand of the engine. So it's a Yamaha. And we're going to send it an integer for the horsepower. So again, when that calls the constructor up here, it will set the name that's displayed here as the Speedster. Yamaha will be sent up to the motor for the brand. 50 will be sent as the horsepower. And it didn't indent correctly, which means I forgot my semicolon. And then on this boat one, I can do a display boat. So now let's try to compile it again. Looks okay. Let's run it. And there we get that we have boat name Speedster. We have the motor brand is Yamaha. And I need something different in there. So let me look at that. That's ugly. So in this one, after I print the motor and the brand, I need more space there. So I guess I could put a space there, see if that's good enough. We could always do a tab. We can do different things. Let me compile it. Let me run it. That looks better. You can put more spaces if you want. You can put a tab, whatever. But that gives us all of that stuff. So let's take a look to make sure that we've tested all of our functions. So when we create the boat, so we'll start with that. We create the boat. It's going to test this constructor. It's then going to call and test the constructor for motor. We're then going to, then when we do the boat one.display boat, it runs this display function, which also calls the display motor. So we've tested both constructors and both display functions. And that should be it. So composition probably doesn't happen as frequently as inheritance, I would think. And it's a little simpler, I think, but I just wanted to do this video so we know what's happening. We know how the parts work. And it's not limited to one. You could have as many components as you need to in order to make up this. So it allows you to be more modular in your development of classes, where you can put classes together that can then be used as part of other classes. Again, not in the inheritance way, but in a composition fashion. As always, if you have questions, make sure you let me know.